Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Bituation Room. Hope everyone is still drunk, honestly. Like, that is my ultimate hope for you. I sobered up a little bit ago, but I got, a solid 4 hours of sleep, drank way too much whiskey, and watched these results roll in. And then, at 7 a.m. Eastern, had a pang of fear that I would pick up my phone and, oh, yeah, look, Michigan went to Donald Trump. Donald Trump has won the presidential election. Um, this is the Bituation Room. We're a progressive leftist show. We platform not only funny comedians and good folks, but smart thinkers, um, elected representatives, activists, organizers, people who've been in this struggle for decades and decades and decades. And I'm going to give you my thoughts about this election, but I just wanted to open up and say that this show has never been a Trumpy focused show. Um, it has responded to these fascistic times, but it really was about and is about creating a space where we can have, real radical strategic discussions while also being silly and funny and being able to not take ourselves so seriously in the way that oftentimes when we have strategic radical discussions we do. And in the coming weeks, I know that a lot of folks will probably want to tune out the news. I don't blame you. It is really depressing, but I did want to just make a small pitch to keep me in your rotation, to have the Bituation Room as part of your diet, as we move forward together and as we go into this next chapter of a very long fight that a lot of us have been in for, again, many, many decades. So, um, yeah, I hope to share like my own progress with y'all because I think before the election, I said to myself, "Look, if Donald Trump wins, first thing I'm gonna do is text my neighbors." I know that sounds silly, but um, I don't chill with my neighbors enough, And Tracy Rosenthal, who wrote "Abolish Rent" and really talked about like, organizing and defending ourselves and our communities starts so hyper locally and it starts next door. So I want to ask them, let's get together. How are you? If you need anything, if anything happens, if anything goes down, this is my number. Like, you know what I mean? Like, here is my emergency contact, right? Like, these are things that are so simple. And for those of us who maybe don't have as much community, some people do through, school or religious affiliations. But that to me is like the first thing, other than crying a little bit. Let's be real. There's been some tears and there will continue to be tears this morning. So, um, and I think specifically there's anger. The other thing that you all know about this show and that we know about one another is that you're never gonna get me to defend the Democratic Party as a cogent unit that is serious at all. Like you're never gonna get me to defend them. You're not gonna get me to defend them on policy, on most policy, but certainly as a party. Um, I mean, this is why it is so easy for me to argue with right wingers sometimes, is because I kind of get it. Like I'm like, yeah, because the Democrats are feckless. Um, but anyway, I did want to just I did want to like name and look at just how crazy these results are. Donald Trump may in fact win the popular vote, and I also wanted to name that I'm not taking these results as like face value, meaning I'm going to accept them because of course what else are we going to do? But also we need to look and see if there was irregularity, right? And we need to look and see how much voter suppression there was. It would not surprise me if, Republican lawmakers, in addition to, Republican and Trump appointed justices around this country, we're not all like, wink, wink, nod, nod type shit. However, The win here is pretty fucking resounding. It's pretty fucking big. It looks like the 2016 map, which is also, I mean, in terms of what I had been saying, which was I feel 2016 vibes, these are the vibes. They have borne themselves out. This looks like Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016, and you see Wisconsin, and this was the biggest thing. I mean, the biggest thing really, and Paige, who's been doing amazing work, who's a producer here, was saying that initially when you looked at Florida and kind of the blowout of Donald Trump's win in Florida, that was an indicator that things were not going to go well for Donald Trump in other places. I mean, excuse me, for Kamala Harris in other places. So that blowout was like huge, right? And then, of course, Virginia wasn't looking good. I mean, luckily it was early, but the other two states that came in early were North Carolina, which it looks here, Trump winning by 4 points, or almost 4 points, and, Georgia, which Trump won by 3 points. So these were coming in early, and that was bad. But then, of course, when Pennsylvania rolled around, again, he's winning Pennsylvania by 2 points. It just, it's like you can't even look at Jill Stein. Like, Jill Stein can't make up those numbers. This bitch only got 4.5%. So anyway, I digress, but obviously Michigan is still coming in. It's not looking good for Kamala Harris. Wisconsin did go to Donald Trump, and onward and onward and onward. So, the other, I mean, I guess just the broad strokes of this, and something that many other commentators have said, and I think this is what's really key right now, is mainstream news for the first time, there's like a moment here. There's this shock moment, which I think we are all feeling, in which sometimes some real truth can get through. And I thought this was an excellent little roundup of why the Democrats lost. And it's like, yeah, girl. But take a look. This played out on CNN. Give me 1 second as I bring this up. All right, give me thumbs up on this one then.
2016 kind of mess, that there were all of these issues that the Democratic Party saw laid out very clearly in 2016 after Hillary Clinton's loss, and that rather than address those issues, they moved and they migrated. What happened is that the pandemic, right? The pandemic came upon us, and Joe Biden happened to be the person for the pandemic. And I think they mistook that moment for a referendum on what the Democrats had to offer, rather than being introspective. I'll tell you one other person who I think is going to be incredibly important, actually two other people. The first person is Bernie Sanders. Yeah. One of the things that Bernie Sanders has been saying since at least 2014 has been about how the Democratic Party, if it wants to keep these coalitions, needs to talk about bread and butter issues. It needs to talk about politics. A lot of people attacked him for that, saying, well, are you saying that cultural politics don't matter? That's not what he was saying. He was saying we need to focus on these things. The other person is Stacey Abrams. We have not heard a lot from Stacey Abrams in this election cycle.
So she goes basically to say that Stacey Abrams was building these coalitions in Georgia and Michigan. And it's the exact same thing that we talked about with Representative Summer Lee yesterday, who was saying, look, we keep on tacking to the center every single election. And yet, what about the new coalitions? What about the young people? What about people of color? What about progressives? What about all of the issues that we've been clamoring over, that we've been pulling this party, and in part thanks to the Bernie Sanders movement? What happened to that? And as I said, in fact, I actually, I was asked by Piers Morgan, like, oh, well, if Kamala loses, why was she going to lose? And I said straight up, it's because we all know that she has not listened and invited in the progressive base of the Democratic Party. And Joe Biden, for all of his genocidal flaws in 2020, he knew they had to do it. And they did. Bernie Sanders sat with Joe Biden and they, hashed over policy. And there was some policy gains, there were some policy losses, but there were massive overtures, to say nothing of the fact that it was a very long primary season and there was a lot of time to do that. But there was an attempt, there was an effort made to actually reach out to what voters care about it and about bread and butter issues. The other thing that I am, being reminded of is um myself back in 2020. Um, Back in 2020, I was working on Newsbroke. This was the very end of it. And you know what? Maybe I'll bring it back. But I was working on Newsbroke, and we had an episode that was basically about how to beat Donald Trump. This was early 2020. How to beat Donald Trump. And it was effectively listen to your base, listen to your progressive base, and recognize, and this is the biggest part of it, recognize that Joe Biden was merely a salve. He was merely a band-aid over the gaping wound of a Democratic Party that has abandoned, FDR, populism, and real bread and butter issues, and truly, working class appeals. Joe Biden was that band-aid. It was an okay band-aid on certain issues, like, the labor relations board. Okay, there was some good things, but it was always a band-aid because Joe Biden did not have, and still does not have, a vision for this country. This motherfucker thought Republicans were going to have an epiphany. And so back in 2020, and every time I go back to watch Newsbroke, I'm always like, oh, that was fun. I'm trying to find it for y'all so I can bring it up. But, back then, I was saying, we will be sorely mistaken if we think that we can beat Donald Trump and we can beat MAGA without a vision for this country. Because say what you will about Donald Trump's vision, say what you will about Project 2025, it's a project. I want a project. Where can I get a project? Hey, what's our project? You know what I mean? Not just what's our project in terms of fundraising off of Donald Trump's victory. No, what is our project to actually beat the right, to actually stop fascism, and to also make it, and again, this is not about beating people. This is not about shaming voters. This is about offering voters something real, something effective, something that speaks to them, something that excites them, so that it is not a matter of will I, won't I, a white lady who ultimately broke for Trump at the very last minute. It is coherent, because when it is not say what you will about Donald Trump, in his incoherence, he is coherent. And we know this. And so that has been, I think what that woman was saying on CNN was really, really apt, because these are the wounds of 2016. These are the flaws of 2016 that the Democrats still have no plan to address. That's the top line, of course, about the Democratic Party. The subsequent lines is more than the Democratic Party. To me, the subsequent lines are about democracy, our democracy as an infrastructure in and of itself. I mean, the almighty NATO Green, I think he has a line of something like, like, it's okay, you can have our democracy, we weren't using it anyway. Like, in order to convince people that we have to defend democracy, you've got to show that our democracy and our justice system are cracking, that they're working, they're doing shit. But oh no, when a president was able to sick an entire whipped up mob, a racist, psychotic, election denying mob against the Capitol, we still don't have justice for that. This dude is allowed to run for president, win, absolve himself in all of these cases, and we're the greatest democracy on earth? I don't fucking think so. So it's not just that legislatively you have to deliver for people and sell what you've delivered. If the Inflation Reduction Act was great, if the CHIPS Act was great, how come only a fucking wonk can explain it to me? How come, we bend over backwards to why don't we have ads running on, pre-roll ads or on PBS and NPR or radio ads explaining what it is, telling you about the jobs, and again, this is not partisan, just explaining what it is. So it's not just legislative, but it's judicial. It's democratic. It is this supposed, city on a shining hill that I don't know, where have you seen this shit, man? Where have you seen this work? And there are some, local measures that have passed that are exciting. I want to name that in 7 of the 10 states where abortion was on the ballot, there was they did pass protections for people seeking abortion, which is huge. But of course, you've got Florida, because again, this is the other thing. Florida is like, no, you need 60% to pass it. So, because we actually don't like democracy. So, but it's good news for people in Missouri, Montana, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, and New York, and whatever the hell that thing is there. So, it's good. But again, I mean, these are I'm taking whatever win I can get wherever I can get. And before I bring in my first guest, let's look at the exit polling for for this election. Specifically, this was done in 10 key states. This is from NBC News. Looking at how yes men broke for Trump, women writ large broke for Kamala Harris. But then when you look at white men and white women, 52% for Kamala Harris. These Karens will never love us. These fucking Karens will never stick their necks out for us, okay? I'm sorry. And if you are white and you're a white lady and you're listening, you know what? So am I. So you know what? We got some good people in us. I'm a half, you know what I'm saying? But writ large, these Karens will not help this democracy. These Karens will vote with their husbands. They're scared. They think crime is on the rise. They believe everything that they hear on the news. Whatever. Like these, like, look at the. I'm just like, it's the year 2024. We have yet to have our third Reconstruction, as per our good friend William Barber III. And voting white men 59% for Trump, white women 52%, black men 78% for Harris, black women 92%. But no, everything's fine. No, we don't we don't need we don't need a third Reconstruction. We don't have like any racial animosity or division, or motherfuckers are racist. I'm sorry. Like, we have legacies of Jim Crow, slavery, and just hatred. Biggest news, I think a lot of people are looking at: Latino men, 54% going to Donald Trump, which makes some sense. Latino women, 61% to Harris. Other races, 50 to 45. Again, we know, based on how anti-Black racism in the United States works, and waves of immigration and who's okay and who is not, that if you are middle class and you are a person of color, you get to be white for a little bit, so long as you keep on punching down, and once you've climbed that ladder into the United States, you kick it out from behind you. That's the way it works. That's the way whiteness and immigration have always worked in the United States of America since the genocide of the American Indians. I mean, that is the way that it works. So, that doesn't shock me. I'm not like, how did Trump appeal? No, man, it's the same thing. It's the same. And I'll tell you this last before I bring Usamah in. And I think Mehdi Hassan talked about this. He has a great piece. You guys should read it on Zateo that really was very helpful. Because I have not said Gaza yet. But Gaza matters. But Mehdi Hassan also talks about it's more than Gaza, right? It was a lot of factors. This is big. And one of those factors has to do with the perception, the the vibes session, he called it, the perception that the economy is not doing well, which is just bonkers, right? I mean, it's again, we live in a world of perception. Like the economy is actually doing pretty damn well. It's been doing well. And but that's not enough. And it's certainly not enough to get people to vote for one another versus over them their own self-interest. And so lastly, but last, I am doing I did The Sun. Oh my God, that's a whole other story. I'll tell you guys Friday. I did The Sun magazine, it's like a right-wing magazine, and they had a YouTube channel, and they interviewed me. And I'm waiting to be interviewed. And there's a Fox News contributor named Joe Conchula, in my opinion. But anyway, Joe Concha, which basically means fat pussy in Argentine Spanish. I just want everyone to know that. He was waiting, and we were like, hi, okay, like all the fucking pundits do behind the scenes. And I said to him, I go, do you really want this? Like, do you really want, this drama? Do you want Donald Trump? And he was like, I had more money. I did really good. Donald Trump, he endorsed my first book, and he's going to endorse my second book. And, it was, things were just good for me personally. And it's like, you cannot, that is so very Republican, but also so very human. And it's like, what do we do? How do we break that self-interest? And it wasn't even about like, oh, his taxes were lower. It was just like, he just got more shine, you know? It's a self-interested, cynical vote. And yes, Donald Trump once again played the outsider. And I said this in 2020. I shared it on my YouTube channel, my old News Broke video. You got to be an outsider. You got to be authentic. And you've got to have a vision. And you know what's so funny about that fucking video, y'all? When I fucking find it, I'm going to fucking play it for y'all. Is that in the be authentic part of my News Broke episode, I use Kamala Harris as an example. I used her as an example of not being authentic. And what I did was I took her responses to whether she believes in Medicare for all within the span of like 3 months, not even a month, different interviews, and her saying the opposite thing. Yeah, I don't believe, let's get rid of all that bureaucracy. No. I was saying, let's get rid of it for me. Oh, yes, I do believe, raise her hand in the debate. She has been flip-flopping. She has been inconsistent. She has been like had no real convictions. Anyway, with me, he is I don't know what your official title is. This is what I do for, me just disrespecting all of my guests. He works for the Justice Democrats. Please welcome Usamah Andrabi. Usamah, how are you?
I am okay, Francesca. How are you?
I'm struggling. Can't you see this, right? Usamah, you have been on this show before, specifically when we were talking about Gaza. God, when was that? Like maybe 6 months ago or 10 months ago. And speaking about, I think this was before Joe Biden dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, what are we doing here, people? Why are we cozying up to Netanyahu? This bodes really poorly for his reelection chances. And that was then. This is now. What do you make of, and you can expand more broadly, and again, everyone knows that our thoughts are very half-baked because it's just happened, but what do you make of the impact of an issue like Gaza on this election?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, obviously, this is a terrible day for a lot of people, and millions of people, including the millions of people who voted for Donald Trump. It's a terrible day for them, and the outcomes for them are also going to be terrible. And we know that, and we should, be sad about that as well. But to your point, I think Gaza obviously played a role here. We've seen it in Dearborn. We've seen it amongst young voters across the country. And also, to your point, it's not the only issue. I think it represents a larger problem that we saw, which is not a problem of just the Kamala Harris campaign or what was the Joe Biden campaign that turned into the Kamala Harris campaign. It is a problem with the Democratic Party. and it is a issue that has been going on for decades and decades, that we have seen them refusing to, center the needs of working class people and fighting for the needs of the majority, frankly, because they have become increasingly a party that is corporate backed, which Republicans already are as well, but they're truthful about it, right? And they don't pretend to be anything else. And so what we have seen for cycle after cycle is Democrats trying to continue to paint themselves as the party for the people in comparison to Republicans, which sure, maybe they are a little better, but what everyday people are seeing and what Republicans are unfortunately exposing is the hypocrisy within the Democratic Party, that they are beholden to corporate elites, that they do have the, Mark Cubans of the world and the Reid Hoffmans of the world going out on TV and standing up for them instead of having, the actual people that you need to be fighting for in the interests of those everyday people. And so that, I think, Gaza is a big part of that. We, as Stead Herndon, I think this morning made a really great point on the Daily, which was President Biden from the beginning was supposed to be a transition presidency. It was supposed to be a transition presidency to a different type of Democratic Party, to a new generation, because his election was an election that happened in a moment in response to Donald Trump, in response to COVID, in response to an uprising of Black Lives Matter. And it was always a response to the moment. But we never really diagnosed the problem as to why Donald Trump was elected in the first place. Why was he able to win all these voters in the first place? And so by refusing to transition to this different type of party and allowing Democrats to have an open primary or any sort of conversation about change, about leaving the status quo, Democrats tied themselves to what was, by and large, an unpopular administration, no matter how many, positive policies and negative policies came out of it. And instead of being the change and the vision that we should be doing. And Republicans got to be the agent of change in this cycle.
Yeah.
And Democrats, by and large, were the agents of your alternative is fascism, which is true. But for people, like you said, who feel like their reality right now is I can't afford to put food on my table, or food or gas is too high, that reality is too bad to exist. And they don't want to continue with the status quo. And so this threat of fascism to them comes with also a promise of maybe their tides will be rise. And obviously, we know what the policies of the right are. We know what the policies of Republicans are. They are not centering working people. They are not beneficial to everyday people. It's, cutting taxes for corporations and billionaires and giving handouts and tax cuts to them. So we know what the actual truth is, but this is a problem of the Democratic Party.
100%. And because to your point, we have never seen a campaign like Donald Trump's in 2024 more openly bankrolled by the richest people in the world. And if you, I mean, it's so, oh God, I can't, okay. I'm starting to think about Sanders. Because that was Sanders's line. The billionaire class, the 1% versus the 99% of all of us that he took from Occupy Wall Street, and bless him for doing so. I mean, this is all, it was laid out there. And now you've got Elon Musk, in the bag for Trump so flagrantly, and the Democrats unable to name that. Now, I'm not saying that would have made a difference to like say, they're bankrolled by billionaires. But if you can then say, we are not taking X, Y, or Z money on this campaign, and here's exactly what I'm going to do for all Americans. No piecemeal, whatever, no first-time homeowner, like everyone's getting, whatever it is, whether it's Medicare for all, or whether it is, I don't know, a fucking, give me $1,000. I don't give a shit. Let's go to Andrew Yang territory. Whatever it is, like a policy, something that is so concrete, that cannot be ignored. This is me just, it's failing to learn the lessons. And I'm someone, Usamah, who is very much on board with Kamala Harris being the candidate instead of Joe Biden, especially at that, the late stage. And of course, hindsight, wouldn't a fucking primary have been amazing? that being said, when all the vibes were like, she had run out of vibes to run on, and there was real policy and real like authenticity. Okay, who are you? What do you believe? She is, I mean, let's be real. She is kind of a craven centrist Democrat. That's what she is. And so,
Yeah.
and that came, I think that was very clear.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can just look back to 2016 and, to your point, to what the Bernie campaign was running on, to see that by that point, the electorate, Democrat and Republican, already felt like the political class was a class that was aligned for elites,
Yes.
and was not working for everyday people. And
Yes.
obviously, we know that Donald Trump is one of those elites, but he provided an alternative vision. It's a lie, nonetheless, right? And it's rooted and uses a lot of right-wing fanaticism and fear-mongering and demonizing of immigrants and every marginalized community you can think of to do so. But that's how they do it. And instead of building this sort of new collective vision that we haven't actually done as a Democratic Party, we've only seen bits and pieces of it come out of the progressive wings of this party. Instead of actually building that vision that says, these are the things we should be doing, we gave up on that. We had a child tax credit. We had unemployment insurance. We had student debt cancellation, and all these things we let lapse, we let stop. We stopped fighting for them. And so we just started talking about it while also talking about how crypto is so great and how we're going to fund tech billionaires, and how the Black Opportunity Plan is by giving them investments in crypto, instead of talking about actual things that people need to live their lives and improve their lives right now.
Yeah.
And that is why we've seen, terribly so, such a class realignment that is going on over these elections. You saw people who make over $100,000 move towards Kamala Harris, and people who make under $100,000 move towards Donald Trump. And what are we to say if we are the ones who are appealing to the richest people in this country and not to the poorest people? I think it's obviously been a failure of this party to live up to what they espouse to be their values in any real way, and given up when it's hard. And frankly, the response has always been, we see Republicans doing well because they're attacking right and they're attacking immigrants and they're doing all these things.
Yes.
And we think that our response should be, we should do that too. We should demonize immigrants. We should introduce horrible immigration bills. We should get a little transphobic. We should fund a genocide, when none of that is actually what voters want either. It is just what Republicans are selling to distract voters from the fact that they're also picking their pockets, when we have an opportunity to provide a vision that lifts these people up and also stops funding genocide, also protects trans people, also creates a pathway to citizenship for immigrants. And these are not unpopular policies. And I think we saw that across the country, right? Even in red states, abortion ballot initiatives are popular. People who are running on progressive policies, Rashida Tlaib in Dearborn is outperformed everyone, Kamala Harris. And so we need to be looking at how leaders like Rashida, like Summer Lee in Western Pennsylvania, who was on your show last night, obviously, talking about everyday people's issues and actually standing up for her community and winning what we used to think was, a bellwether area of the country. Right. There are people in our Congress who we can look to, who can lead us forward. And that's what we should be doing. It is time for the Democratic Party to clean up shop. There has been a class of leaders, of consultants, of donors who have long controlled and dictated what our policies should look like. And they have always been center-right, corporate-backed, and that is not policies that everyday people see themselves in.
But also, to your point, I think things are getting, because we've had such rampant wealth inequality in this country, we don't have a fair tax code, and we have so many new minted billionaires. I think that Democrats are also playing a losing game, because these billionaires will always throw down. Yeah, there'll be some crypto money that's okay. Yeah, I'm okay with Kamala Harris. And like you said, or that guy Reed or whatever, they'll dangle some money in front of Democrats, but push comes to shove, they're going to want to throw down with Republicans. They don't want a higher corporate tax rate, even if it's, keeping pace with 1952. They don't want none of that. And if they need fascism to get there, fucking great. Someone's got to, create the sort of tech, tech dystopia where we all get like tagged and shit. You know what I mean? Like that someone's got to be the private contractor that does that and does who wants to get the mass deportations contract. That shit's going to be up for grabs.
No, absolutely. I mean, be it APAC, be it crypto, be it any single fucking billionaire that has funded all these different super PACs and elections, their interests are their own. It is always their self-interest. It is never the interest of the Democratic Party. It's never the interest of people. It is never even the interest of what their issue espouses to be. Yeah. It is always just to advance the interest of a small handful of billionaires who are the same people who fund our super PACs, same people who fund our Supreme Court corruption, and the same people who are preventing us from having a fair campaign finance system. And we, for some reason, as a party, try to ingratiate ourselves to these folks as if, to your point, anything is going to change when all we are doing is moving us away from the values that we are supposed to be fighting for and the needs of everyday people. The needs of a billionaire are never going to be the same as the needs of everyday people in this country. And we are being painted as a party that stands for billionaires. And there has to be a wholesale change from top to bottom.
Yeah, and look, Justice Democrats, you guys put out a statement basically saying exactly that. It's time to end the era of career politicians and the corrupt campaign finance laws to keep them in power. Either they can choose to step down and welcome a new generation of teachers, nurses, union workers, and everyday people to the halls of power, or they can be forced out of the ballot box. Their time is up. I mean, that like gives me chills because it makes me actually excited because the prospect of getting rid of, horrible Dems is very exciting. And interestingly, when, so much has happened in 4 years, and yet, I mean, I guess a lot has happened in 4 years, but in 8 years, but I'm like thinking specifically of what's happened since 2020, having the majority of the Senate, nearly passing things like raising the minimum wage, and only to be stymied by our own party. Because of course we were gonna be stymied by our own party. Because of course it was gonna be some fucking centrist corporate Democrat like Kirsten Sinema. But that's not on her. She's a product of the Democratic Party. Like she's absolutely. These are the kinds of shit ass candidates that we run up. These are the kind of people who get supported and get tons and tons of money to get reelected. And so like I'm very upset that the Democrats lost the Senate, but also Sherrod Brown's been in there for fucking ever. And like John Tester, didn't that dude like the first guy who like took a bunch of dark money and super PAC money? Like these are not good Democrats.
No, absolutely. I mean, like as long as a Democratic Party, it has included people like Kirsten Sinema or Joe Manchin or Josh Gottheimer and Henry Cuellar and the Unbreakable Nine in the House. Like we can just look back at who are the people who stopped us from advancing policies that actually helped working class people in this country. And it is a handful of corporate Democrats funded by a handful of fucking billionaires. And it's the same group of people doing the same shit over and over again. And there was a glimmer of hope at the start of the Biden administration when we actually passed some of these things. And we immediately saw ourselves capitulate to corporate donors and the corporate Democrats
because and the Senate parliamentarian, never forget.
And a parliamentarian and an archaic policy that doesn't make any fucking sense that we are still using. And so it's again like I obviously fascism is terrible, mass deportations are terrible, a national abortion ban is terrible. This is all fucked. And also the Democratic Party's leadership has to answer for this. This is on them that they allowed under their watch not just one, but two fucking Trump presidencies. Like we should not be having close elections with Donald Trump. It should not be nail biter and then scooping up battleground states. This is a rejection of the brand of the Democratic Party that has existed for decades since we saw a class realignment in the Nixon era. And it's time for us to build it up from the bottom up, from working class movements, building union power, like folks like, what the UAW is doing, creating a movement towards a national strike and then electing leaders that can actually be a bloc in Congress to set a people's agenda and represent the needs of working class people. And so that's why, to your point in our statement, we're very clear-eyed about what's coming up next for us, right? We as an organization are here to take out the trash of the Democratic Party and take out these corporate Democrats, be it, the Richie Torreses, the Josh Gottheimers, the Henry Cuellars, whomever continues to be beholden to the people that are losing us these elections and frankly betraying working class people, their time is up unless we
Yes.
want to just continue to lose elections to Republicans.
Yes. No, they want to narrowly win elections and then be like, oops, we lost again. And, in the group chat is lit over here in my life. But, one thing that, I'm just going to read this piece because I think it's, all right, Scott K. I don't really know you, Scott, but Scott said something like this. Trump or another far-right demagogue coming after him is likely to win because we're in a structural crisis that neither party can fix. So right now we're just alternating in power. Analysis from Emmanuel Wallerstein, taken from Conversation, and then he had a conversation with him. If you want to understand right-wing populism in the U.S. or indeed Europe or other parts of the world, understand it in terms of people panicking. They don't know how to protect themselves. They do see that they're in a shaky situation. They lash out at whatever. That leads to xenophobia. You find the enemy and attack it in a way that doesn't solve any of your problems. Makes you feel better for a few minutes until the next time that it doesn't work. It also explains electoral fluctuations. But then he writes, and I like this part, to resolve this crisis requires creating a new system that will become hegemonic. Right now, the Republicans are trying to do that. They may succeed, or there may be a fluctuation like 2008 or 2016, but this will require a lot of creative thinking. In other words, we need a new paradigm immediately. We have no moment to waste on this new paradigm. And as I said initially before you came on, this is a moment where sometimes folks like yourself get a slot on mainstream news and can say the thing. And we have to keep on saying it. My deep fear, Usamah, is that, and I feared this before and I still fear this, is that Democrats will never learn their lesson, that they will never learn to embrace the FDR populism of their actual past, that they will always try to cater to the Karens, that they will never build these multiracial working class coalitions that we know we need. And that's like just a real deep fear of mine that, okay, we might have like a few days of the ability to talk about progressive policies and, hey, the base, listen to the base, but that eventually they'll move on and be like, no, you know what? We got to move even more to the right on the border. Look at the way that borderline fucking failed, Kamala. Look at that borderline. The way they ran to the right on the border, speaking about an issue that has no vision from Democrats, no vision, and needs one. And what you just said earlier, people are okay. They would like a pathway to citizenship, immediate legalization and a processing. Like, we're going to help process people. We're going to expand the amount of work visas. We're going to, people, we are not naturally, opposed to that idea because it's a plan. I don't know.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, the right has always played a game very successfully, and the right, speaking that broadly, no matter party lines, of divide and conquer, right? That is the best of that it can do. It's always to, let's find who we can demonize, how we can divide these communities against each other, and so that they won't notice that we are actively picking their pockets, but we are going to stand up for them. And that's what we've seen with immigrants for years upon years. And to your point, right, we tacked right? We introduced an insane bill as a threat to Republicans that was, we are never going to win Republicans' games in Republican arenas. And we should not try to be doing so. We should not be dividing and conquering. We should see that divide and conquer approach and actually try and provide a unifying collective vision that says, these people are not your enemies.
Yes.
The people who are your enemies are the people who have $100 billion while you can't afford gas. Why is that the case? And the reason we don't talk about things like that is because the same corporate donors are the ones that control the leadership of both parties.
Yes.
And Democrats refuse to give up that mantle, refuse to give up that dedication to the richest people in this country, while talking slowly about things like corporate price gouging and other things. But it feels fake to so many people because Republicans expose it as fake. And we have to be an alternative. We cannot be, no one is going to look at a hard right take from Republicans and a soft right take from Democrats and say, which one do I want?
Exactly.
They want the real thing if they're selling the real thing. They're not going to want some watered down version. So we need to stop trying to feed into that and
but it's also
actually be an alternative.
Well, that's the thing about corporate price gouging. Like, I don't know what the fuck that, I mean, I do know what that means, but I think most people don't know what that means, you know? And you need to have that broken down to you. So you're saying, I'm going to implement price controls. You should not have to pay more than whatever it is, $3 for a gallon of milk. For it's a lot more than that, but you know what I mean. Like, you should not have to pay X amount. I believe in controlling the prices. Why? Because these gas companies can afford it. They've had record profits. Look at their profits. So until they learn, or I'm threatening taking away all of their subsidies, because until they learn to treat the American people right and not gouge them, you don't get any handouts from Uncle Sam. That's how it works. So, like, things like that, people understand. Like, I will put a cap on how much you're going to pay. I will make the corporations pay. You were an essential worker. You put your ass on the line. They had made hand over fist money. And to your point about how to run it, because there's always this fear, right? Well, if you don't have corporate money, can you even compete in the same arena? Blah 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 blah. Bernie fucking Sanders. I mean, a guy who with disheveled hair and just a firm belief in working people. Like, that's all it took. I mean, what a joke, Bernie Sanders. What a joke he was until he wasn't at all. Until he wasn't at all. Why? Because he was actually speaking to all of us. And oh my God, I can't even. I'm going to start crying now.
No, I mean, it's so real. And I mean, like, the problem is not, don't talk about corporate price gouging, right? The problem is you can't talk about corporate price gouging and talk about how corporations are evil and then go around and say, what we need to do is invest in big tech and Wall Street backed crypto. And here's Mark Cuban. These are oppositional to each other, and voters are not dumb. And we act like voters are dumb when they just understand the simple things of their actual life right now. And we are telling them that billionaires are the enemy. And then we are trotting out billionaires to give us a pitch about why they should vote for us. And obviously, Trump is doing that with Elon Musk too. But like I said, there's no pretending there.
Yeah.
They are trying to sell a vision of this is what you can become. And we are trying to sell a vision that billionaires are both a little bad and also a little good, and not always bad. And capitalism is okay. And actually, these things are all fine and everything can work together. When, like, that's not the lived reality for any person in this world. So,
I mean, and it's so funny because you see the right, it's like, the other thing is, like, just if the right calls you a socialist, lean into it. Lean into it. Like again, the Bernie Sanders model, but it's like the right is at least honest on some issues where they're like, a Green New Deal would mean a massive overhaul of the economy. And it's like, yes, we do. Yes, we do. Because it's unsustainable and corporations are not only getting rich, but they're killing the planet in the meantime. Doesn't that sound bad to you? Yes, it does. Like, Democrats, again, and I think it's not just how they run the campaigns. It's not just the lack of vision. It is the fallacy of liberalism and the fallacy of incrementalism and the fallacy, as you are saying, of being able to say billionaires are bad, except for some, or saying, hey, capitalism's working out really good. No, you cannot have it both ways. This is a failed economic system for the majority of people. It is obviously a failed democracy as well. But so, yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of other thoughts, but I did want to ask you because, and I see Ken Page, who trans guy in Idaho who needs some hopium, and I think we all deserve to give it to him. My hope is that, just like in 2016 birthed the 2018 squad, the 2024 Trump election will birth something inside electoralism and outside of it that is very radical and visionary. But what say you?
I think we have no choice. I think that is just our marching orders, no matter what. The alternative is to continue down a generation of fascism that targets every marginalized community and that lifts up rich people at the expense of them. And so, absolutely, we don't know what's to come. But we know what we have to do, which is electing, ending this putting a nail in the coffin of this Democratic Party and building a Democratic Party led by, the handful of leaders we have in Congress who are actually trying to build this collective vision to unify people across all backgrounds and lift all boats against and unite us against our shared enemies, against corporations, against billionaires and right-wing super PACs that are the only reason that we don't have anything we want, right? And that is what we have to do. And it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take also taking down a campaign finance system in the long term that is obviously anti-democratic and leads to outcomes like these where we can spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and it just doesn't fucking matter because we're just throwing money at the wall. We need to get down to 101, listen to voters, talk to these Latino voters, talk to these white male voters who we obviously are mad that they voted for Donald Trump, but also that's not enough. Why did they vote for it? What is motivating those interests? And why are we not building a better vision for them? Because our vision is popular. Progressive policies are popular, from ending a genocide to Medicare for all to a Green New Deal. These are all overwhelmingly popular policies across party lines. Raising taxes on billionaires is one of the most popular policies across the country, Republicans, Independents, Democrats. Why is that not our bread and butter to be a party actually of working people? And so, to the point we made earlier, that's our hopium, is to tear down what is left of this archaic Democratic Party and build a party that's actually rooted in people and is a source of people power in the highest halls of power. It's going to take a long time, but I do think, this cycle is a crucial one to do that. We're clear-eyed. We didn't challenge anyone last cycle because AIPAC is a piece of shit. But we're going to be challenging folks this cycle, so they will be looking out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and thank you for all the work that you guys continue to do. And I know it's been hard for Justice Dems, especially with the losses of Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. But you know what? It makes me want to cry. And even Summer Lee, like talking to her yesterday, it's just they got taken out by a fucking genocidal lobby and they don't care. They don't have regrets. They're not like, oh, I should have done something different. They don't care. It's really, really inspiring. They don't run scared, They're proud. They're proud of it because they stood on their word and they doubled down and they know what side they're on. I mean, we need fucking people like that. I'm so moved by that.
Yeah, I mean, I said this to a lot of folks after Jamal and Cori's losses, which are, our Congress is a less representative Congress without a Jamal and a Cori, two of the most working class members of Congress, a former nurse and a middle school principal who actually understood what everyday people go through and were representing those interests in Congress. We are a far less representative, a far less intentional Congress without them. But we should see that moment as proof of just how strong our progressive movement is, and frankly, just how impactful everyday people can be. That a former nurse, that a former middle school principal a singular super PAC have to spend $15 million against them just to defeat them. With all the other bullshit analysis that came that they wanted to say was all those things, it still took $15 million to take out these working class leaders. Yeah. Which to me just shows how weak our opposition is. We are not against an insurmountable enemy. No matter how much money billionaires have, no matter how much money AIPAC or crypto spends in these election cycles, they are on skates. They are being exposed as enemies to the working class and to the needs of everyday people. And our power is much stronger than we feel it is right now.
Yes. I mean, the reason, that's why I'm emotional. I'm crying because it's I am sad about Trump, especially when I think about my daughter, but I am crying because I am filled with just awe and appreciation for the people who do this work and who have fought so hard. And I'm there's nothing that makes me cry more than solidarity, because that's just that's my kink. And so that's why. And so it's yes, Bowman's still going to be around. Bush is going to be around. And of course, we have our current Congress people to protect and to support. And I think, it's funny because yesterday the one thing that Congresswoman Lee said was like, we need to build different coalitions, and it's something that CNN commentator too said, like, Stacey Abrams built these coalitions. She helped flip Georgia in 2020. Like, why isn't Democratic Party like doing this, and building these coalitions that can actually win? Usamah, thank you so much for being on. Please come back.
Anytime.
We love Justice Dems and we support you. And how can we support Justice Democrats? Do you guys have is there a way that you recommend us supporting you?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things, right? One, feel free to donate or whatever you want. We're more than anything powered by grassroots donors as well and everyday people. So you can go to justicedemocrats.com and donate, but also you can go to justicedemocrats.com/nominate and nominate people in your community to be members of Congress. Think about your districts, think about your congressional districts and your communities. And if you are fed up with a failed representation of leadership that doesn't actually reflect your needs or the needs of your neighbors and your friends and family, we don't have to settle for that anywhere. We don't, especially not in deep blue Democratic districts where these leaders should actually be listening to our needs. And so justicedemocrats.com/nominate, you can nominate anyone for any district in this country. And, this is a terrible outcome for our country, this election, but we are full steam ahead of trying to rebuild a new Democratic Party from the bottom up. And we need the support of every community and district across the country to do so. Like you said, the only way that we are going to get past and out and against this widespread division that the right and the Democrats lean into is by building a movement of solidarity. And it's not just electoral, it is labor, it is grassroots, it's people in the streets. It is never going to just be us in Congress electing people. It requires people power behind those folks to both elect them and to hold them accountable when we need to. And that's the work.
Absolutely. And look, silver lining on all this, JD Vance will be running for office when Sean Fain leads a general fucking strike in his goddamn face. So I am looking forward to 2028 already. Usamah Andrabi, thank you so much. You're wonderful. Please take good care of yourself and see you again soon.
You as well.
All right. Thank you all for being here and dealing with the tears. I that's what moves me. I get moved when I realize just how wonderful some of these people are that we have on our team and on our side. And I do want to, however, and I want to bring in my next guest imminently, because I want to talk about the impacts of this election and a Trump administration, not just what it means for Democrats, but also what the real operationalized fascism, American fascism, means for us and looks like for us, and what it necessitates from the left, strategic, like in terms of like our thinking, but also just sort of everyday practice. And so here to answer that very succinctly and perfectly, because it's an easy question, is the wonderful Max Elbaum. Max of Convergence Magazine, correct? Convergence or convergence.org. I don't know if we are a magazine yet.
Yes, convergencemag.org. Actually, convergencemag.com. But thanks. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Max. And it is, I texted you early this morning and said, please come on. And, I was starting to feel hopeful that maybe I didn't need Max Elbaum if Kamala Harris won, because, I could get someone like Fletcher on. I could get somebody, but I need you now. We need you. We always need you. But you obviously have been active on the left and we talked about this every time you come on. Since the days of the Vietnam War, you've seen the rise of the right, you've seen the backlash, and you've written and you've analyzed the backlash to the civil rights movement that we are still living under today. And now you have another Trump victory. And I guess just maybe your thoughts up top, and again, this question of a very real fascism potentially materializing soon, coming to a town near you.
Well, it's obviously a very difficult time. I don't think that people who oppose Trump and the progressive movement in particular, I think we all knew that this was going to be a very close election and we might lose. But the scale of the loss has been a real blow to people. Yeah. And it's led, people have a lot of, all of us, you, me, everybody, we are processing a lot of feelings about it. And I think that that's a stage, inevitable stage that people are going to go through. And people will take different amounts of time to go through that and then have to make choices and decisions about what they're going to do in the next stage. People can choose to resist and be part of the opposition. Some people will choose for a longer time to retreat into private life for some very narrow focus. And there are certainly people who, especially as you go up the class ladder, who supported Kamala, who are going to defect to the Trump, to MAGA.
Say more about that. What do you mean by that? I mean, why do you think that?
Well, we saw in the run-up the refusal of the Washington Post and the LA Times to endorse, with the fig leaf talking about neutrality and letting their readers decide. And there were plenty of articles that pointed out it was a premature obedience, that the rich people who control those newspapers were hedging their bets in fear of retaliation by Trump if Trump won. And whatever those individuals, Bezos and the person who heads the LA Times, whatever they individually do, there's a bunch of people in the money class who will make their peace with the new administration.
But enough about Bill Maher.
So that's going to happen. I don't think there are many people in the progressive movement that are going to go that way. But in the broad, Cheney to Chomsky coalition that was deployed against Trump, some of that is going to happen. But your audience, the audience for this show are the people who are moving rapidly through processing their emotions toward trying to figure out what's coming at us and what we can do to resist. And those questions are the one your question, and that's what's front and center. We just have to understand that not everybody who was in the trenches the last few months is going to get to that place at the exact same time and be understanding about that.
Yes. I mean, I think that if there's one thing I would advocate for is people not beating one another up about what's the narrative. And I mean, unless you're like Joe Scarborough, I don't care. You can beat up MSNBC hosts, that's fine. But, doing a leftist firing squad and saying it was this, it was that, it was you, or berating people who were knocking doors because they were doing incredible work and saying, oh, it was we need to pull back on that instinct. But I did want to, talk to you. You see the racial, again, the racial makeup. And again, let's leave. I mean, I think the Latino male voters are interesting, but I do just feel like the stark 96% of Black women for Kamala Harris, 8% of Black men for Kamala Harris, and then the majority of white men and women breaking for Trump. Now, obviously, we know there are more white men and women, so there's also that to sort of contest with. But Last cycle we saw Georgia go blue, in part to those coalitions that Stacey Abrams built, in part to the amount of ground game, and, in part to the fact that Brian Kemp hadn't suppressed enough voters and he got wise to it, And I guess I want to ask you, when it comes to like racial justice, when it comes to a third Reconstruction, when it comes to, reclaiming the South in all of it, in a way that does the people who live there justice, who are overrepresented by Republicans. I guess I don't know. This is not really a question, but yeah, what are your thoughts on just what this says about how racist this country is, and how racist Republicans are, and how many are okay throwing down with them, and that racism, as I mentioned up top, very much stems and comes back to anti-Black racism. Whether it's throwing the BLM movement under the bus, calling everyone, thugs, whether it's, false narratives of crime, and whether it's the ticket to whiteness going through, voting Republican, so long as you continue to, be against the, expansion of rights for Black Americans.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we talked about on your show previously, the central driving force of this is a direct descendant of Nixon's Southern strategy and the backlash against the civil rights movement that happened in the 1960s. And the number one target of the 60-year backlash was the Voting Rights Act and gutting of the Voting Rights Act by the MAGA Supreme Court, and then Citizens United. And the opening the floodgates for unaccountable money, those had been the pillars of at U.S. society, of the right wing in U.S. society for decades, and for centuries, as a matter of fact. So this is why the term white Christian nationalism is often used to describe the MAGA movement, because of the centrality of white supremacy, and particularly anti-Black racism. What happened in Springfield, and the Haitian people have not been forgiven for the Haitian Revolution, which scared the shit out of U.S. powers and actually the whole European world too. I mean, as the first, revolution to throw off that colonial empire of that period. So that's central to the MAGA message. I think we have to face up to at this particular moment is that the core MAGA haters were not the only ones who voted for Trump this time around. Looking at the scale of this, his victory at this point, I think he's ahead in the popular vote. Which is a big shift. I think it may not end up that way. Kamala may end up with a slight lead in the popular vote when it's all counted. But the Republicans have lost the last 4 or 5 or 6. There was only one election of the last 7 or 8 where they won the popular vote. But because we have a rigged anti-democratic system with the Electoral College, they benefit from that in terms of who actually wins. So what we have a situation is, in terms of any basic concept of democracy, where you have one person, one vote, and everybody's vote counts the same, we don't have that in the United States. So what we have is an illegitimate system, but it's legal. And so it's accepted by people. Oh yeah, the Electoral College, and that kind of thing. So we're up against a rigged system. But a larger proportion of people voted for Trump than just the MAGA core that are active haters. Now, it's right. The people who voted for Trump gave racism a pass. They gave misogyny a pass. But we have to try to unpack some of the reasons why that happened, because it's not that all those people are active haters. And if you can't write off that layer of the population especially since a lot of the layers of that population are people who are suffering. And MAGA had a story that convinced them that voting for Trump, and there were plenty of anecdotal stories of people who think Trump is a complete jerk, who said they were voting for him anyway.
Right.
Because of they felt that in their options, in their experience, they thought they had a better chance at improving their lives and the life situation of their communities by voting for Trump.
Yeah.
And what does that say then about where we are? And then we have to unpack all the where it's come to this.
Yeah.
And this gets at some of the things you were talking about right at the end.
With Usamah.
With your last.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which has to do with the fact that MAGA has developed a very compelling story and a solution, a claimed solution based on lies, of course, of what is going to speak to people's interests and pain and discontents. It's based on lies, but we do have to understand we're in a period of both hardship and incredibly rapid change in this country. We haven't recovered from the pandemic.
No.
What that did in terms of the economy, there are all kinds of things that occurred in people's day-to-day experience over the last decade, including people, and we're speaking here especially about working class people of all racial backgrounds, where the Trump people had a story, a narrative about blaming and shaming others, and that the Democrats were elitists who only cared about themselves and certain allegedly cultural things, which, of course, the Democrats' defense of certain marginalized people like trans people and so on, the Republican arguments of scapegoating trans people, scapegoating immigrants, and so on, was a really effective story with a lot of people.
I mean, we're just to that point quickly. I mean, I shudder to think that the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that were put into ads specifically about trans people actually might have worked. Like, that is terrifying. But also means we have a lot of work to do. I mean, there is in the same way of in terms of immigration and immigrants, in terms of trans people, we have so much work to do in terms of listening to them, platforming them. I mean, for every one of those hateful ads, how many mainstream news organizations had a trans person on to talk about their lives and what they go through? And, you know, like, I think there was one, maybe there was a CNN interviewed like a trans kid and was like, hey, what do you want to say to Donald Trump? And they were like, do you think I'm a person? Like, I mean, but that's it, and what about immigrants? I mean, there's been no counter narrative, not even from the media. The media has rolled over and abdicated their responsibility to also, you don't even have to say you're humanizing them. Listen to immigrants. Talk to the Haitians in Ohio. I mean, like, we have to, the New York Times months later does an expose and Haitians are terrified in Springfield. But that doesn't break through. It's just, it's amazing to me. I mean, sorry, here, I'm going to make sense of what I'm saying. Max, there's no more space on the right to go. There's no more, like, Democrats, you couldn't go more to the right if you tried. Anyway, so, but yeah, I mean, I do think that we are going to see Christian nationalism, yes, come to power. And what does that mean for us? And what does that mean for the left? I mean, what's your advice to people who want to plug in, who want to take action, who want to fortify themselves and their communities against the inevitable attacks that are coming our way?
Well, we're going to have to respond in 2 or 3 different levels of this. So what was just discussed in terms of the electoral side. So we need to continue to act in the electoral arena. What Justice Dems and the other groups that are sort of in that ballpark of trying to build a progressive wing that Bernie, the Squad, the other progressives in federal and then at the state level. The fight back against what the Trump administration is likely to do will also have to be based very largely on what the blue states do, where we have power in the blue states, where there are blue state governments. During the lead up to the Civil War, governments in the northern states defied the Fugitive Slave Act and refused to turn over escaped people who had been enslaved, even though that was federal law. And we are going to have to push people in the states to refuse to turn over immigrants, refuse to cooperate with the attempts to round up and deport people, refuse to accept federal efforts to intervene and prevent people from getting abortions if that's what they want, or gender affirming care. So there's going to be a geographical, spatial dimension to the resistance.
Yes.
And
I just briefly on that, before you don't forget your thought, but I was just going to add, it also provides space to actually, in California, for example, push these Democrats, because this resistance politics is not going to fly anymore. So what are some of the ideas, not just offensively, but offensively, can we pass locally? I mean, in a statewide level. So let's do statewide Medicare for all. I mean, Gavin Newsom he will never get on board with that, even though he ran on it. But these kinds of things for me, it is a test. Okay, which side are you on, Democrats, and having, being able to affect that change and work those levers on, again, as you're saying, in these blue states, not just as they come up in a defensive mechanism, but also in an offensive, visionary, trailblazing terms.
Yeah. And the blue states have to try to do where they can, do what Minnesota did with passing that progressive legislation once they got a trifecta. We have to push the blue states to be both bastions of resistance, but also demonstrating a positive vision of where the country can go if there's a progressive agenda. Yes. But I also want to pick up on, there are some other layers to this that I think we're going to have to get to. And Usamah said, in his points just before the end of your conversation about how the electoral arena is crucial, but it can't be the only arena. And we need to rebuild the labor movement. And you talked about Sean Fain and the 2028 plan and so on. One of the reasons this happened, that the election has happened, is the working class in particular, but communities even beyond the working class, lack the kind of thick cultural, organizational life that existed, say, at certain points in the immigrant communities, in the Black community, in the working class, and all the discussions about the Rust Belt. In cities, those old manufacturing cities in the Midwest where I grew up, in Milwaukee and Dayton, Akron, Cleveland, all of that, where the labor movement and working class, there was an organic political culture and life that connected people to a sense of community. That's been broken up over the decades. And how to rebuild that is extremely difficult. It's not done mainly through electoral work or other ways of connecting people via the internet. There has to be a different kind of base building organization. Revitalizing trade unions is certainly crucial and probably central to that. Although a lot of thinking has to go on about how you expand that notion of a labor movement even beyond the collective bargaining. If we look at the closest thing that exists in the United States today now are those white evangelical churches, which are centers of community life, which then have gotten politicized behind white Christian nationalism. People go every week to the service, there's networks, there's stuff for the kids, there's different clubs and so on, there's social support when you're in trouble. How do you recreate that culture? So there are some things that are not going to be solved by the immediate political action, important as it is. There's some thinking that we have to do about some of the deep structural reasons of where the society has gone. Yeah. The fragmentation of communities and the impact of neoliberalism, and in this country, the whole history of individualism. I mean, what we saw almost unique to the United States during the pandemic, the lack of social solidarity,
amazing,
the way that mass and public health stuff was viewed, even in other capitalist countries. This was fairly unique to the United States, Australia, a few other of the Anglo countries, where that kind of individualism ran rampant. So we're not going to be able to deal with what we've just experienced is solely through the hot takes around what Kamala should have done, orienting the political campaigns more to the working class, not just to professional class, the role of dark money. There's been a transformation over the decades. This 60-year backlash against the civil rights movement and against all the movements of the 60s has led to some political changes and economic changes and structural changes in the country. On the political side, immediately following the Voting Rights Act, we, for the first time, were we even close to what we considered a bourgeois democracy, one person, one vote. Mm-hmm. Since then, the role of gerrymandering, voter suppression, and money we have a different political system. It's happened little by little. It's been creeping along. But if you look at what's happened since Citizens United, the undermining of everything in terms of what political democracy is supposed to be has been a deep political change. And then on the economic side, the polarization between wealth and poverty, the role, I mean, you can't, the term white Christian nationalism is very useful in describing MAGA because it highlights both the theocratic, misogynistic side and white supremacy.
Sure.
But what that term doesn't capture is the role of the plutocrats. Yep. Some people are now using the term Pluto theocracy because Elon Musk and the billionaires and the way the economy got transformed, where you have these right-wing billionaires and the moneyed classes who have financed this right-wing backlash and have given themselves tax breaks. So there's this change in that economic side to which the flip side of that is the diminished role of the trade union movement under attack since Reagan busted the PATCO strike in 1980 as his first major thing with 81 when he came to office. So the flip side of more power to the wealthy has been the erosion of working class trade union power, which has been on the upswing the last few years, when it's the most encouraging thing on our side of the spectrum. But it's still not even, we're still at 6 or 7% in the private sector and 10, 11% overall. In 1955, it was 34%.
Why? So, I mean, we need to keep on remembering that. And yes, the surges are there, the energy is there, but that overall, historically, we are still at these incredible lows. I'm going to just say, let's call it like a crypto-fascist Christian nationalist plutocracy, or what did you say? Pluto. There was a Pluto in there.
I mean, so the right wing has a very simple narrative and story. Yes, you're feeling pain. Society is changing in all kinds of ways. You're being displaced. It's not your fault. It's their fault. And their fault can be immigrants, Islamic people, Muslims,
Sure.
Haitians, trans people. That's their story. Our story is that basically it's got to do with the divide and conquer role of capitalism and the people who have economic power and who exploit the vast majority for their own gain. But making that compelling case in a way that doesn't just become abstract anti-capitalism for people, and linking it to their day-to-day experience and instilling some confidence that the left, the broad left, can do something about it in a practical sense.
Yeah.
That we have not. That's a big challenge for us. It is.
I mean, when I hear you saying, I'm just going to recap, because I hear you saying there is a cultural societal fabric, both on the, union power and trade union power level, but also on just a community wide level that the right has stepped into, but that the left doesn't have its, an adequate cultural, whatever, webbing. I'm going to call it webbing. And for me, I want to just name two things, because I think we've been naming them, but you and I always, and you write a lot about war and militarism. And I think there's these two big gaping failures from the Democratic Party that really are just, I mean, it's not even partisan, because most Americans do not like these things. And that is neoliberal economics and war making, the war machine. And these are things that Kamala Harris, to a lesser extent, neoliberal economics, but honestly, very much, there's been no break. You almost have to give Republicans more credit for breaking with the Cheneys and the Bushes than the Democratic Party has ever, betrayed the legacy of Clinton, which is nothing but NAFTA and, locking up brown people and crime reform and all this BS and war making, And so it's like we live in the upside down, Max, where suddenly war criminals were endorsing Kamala Harris and Republicans were the one, Donald Trump lying, of course, saying he's going to be the candidate for peace. I mean, it is ripe for the taking to say these free trade policies were a mistake. I represent a new way forward. And Bernie did that. Being best friends with Henry Kissinger, not a good look. And these things are popular, and they're not just popular with Democrats, they're popular with independents. And that is huge. I still can't believe how badly some of the projections, Jesus Christ, man, I'm just like, some of these projections about independent voters, they really went the other way there. So we have to cut off those, like whatever, those systems, like the cancer that they are.
Yes. Well, let's take those two things. On the neoliberalism side, I think that it's complicated. The Biden team did break more with neoliberalism,
yes.
But they did so in a way because of the economic stimulus that had to be passed, and all the stimulus work to break with the austerity thing, especially to prevent a big recession after
COVID,
after the pandemic, led to inflation. And this election, a lot of the commentary out there, I mean, I'm not for hot takes, and I think we have a lot of time to try. We need to take some time to figure out what really happened. But certainly the sense that inflation and prices had gone up, whatever was happening macroeconomically, there's a lot of indications that was a huge factor in a lot of people voting for Trump. But that was ironically due to, in large part, because they were trying to break with neoliberalism, but to go far enough and they did a terrible job of trying to explain to anybody what the hell they were trying to do.
Yes.
But it's absolutely correct that without a thoroughgoing break, without an economic policy that actually delivers something tangibly, not just in macroeconomic statistics, that you're never going to win working class support across racial lines over time. You need to be delivering things to your working class base.
Jobs guarantee. That just came to me now. But I was sort of facetiously saying $1,000, but I'm like, no. A jobs guarantee program. Go. And I do think we say Green New Deal so much that it makes it feel we forget what it means, but it is a perfect and brilliant, it is a politically hermetically sealed strategy and platform that is like speaks to the union power, speaks to working people, speaks to the climate crisis. It is like, it is all seeing and all knowing, and it is perfect, and I love it. And I think we need to remember just what a good framework that is for rallying folks.
Yes, and basically Bernie's messaging over the last 8 years, which is for an anti-corporate pro-working class agenda that's inclusive around race and gender and so on, and against militarism. That's in very broad strokes, that's the kind of agenda that's needed in terms of the next stage, what's possible in a more positive cycle if we were going in a positive direction.
Yeah. And then really quickly, Gina Viola, I just really like this because she says we need to demand rights. We need to demand housing and healthcare to be a right. Like that, reclaiming the idea of rights, of actually earning our rights, like that. Or getting rights. I think that's a great framing.
Yeah, the 4 freedoms from FDR, freedom from want, and concretizing that to the 21st century. And then on the militarism side, it's absolutely correct. I mean, the political cowardice and moral bankruptcy of the Biden administration on Palestine and support, not even just complicity, but active support of this genocide and rolling over completely for Netanyahu, even while knowing that Netanyahu was rooting for Trump all the way. There's nothing that, showing how deeply rooted aside from Biden's personal Zionism, how deeply rooted the militarism and search for U.S. defense of U.S. hegemony is. And it's a very long haul to change that. Absolutely has to be part of that. I will say one thing, though, that the Trump people have successfully posed to many people as against the U.S. forever wars, but there hasn't been enough exposing how much of a lie that is. The abrogation, pulling the U.S. out of the nuclear agreement with Iran, pushing the Abraham Accords in the way Trump did, the brinksmanship, the threatening to invade Mexico under the grounds of fighting the cartels. There's nothing peace whatsoever about the Trump administration. It's complete, aggressive, the hell with everybody else, people from shithole countries, the whole hatred of the other. Now, it's true, they successfully used the discontent in their base with paying for foreign wars and losing their kids in casualties of foreign wars and the traumas of that, which is real. But the message was never an anti-war message. The message was a glorification of the use of force. Yes. And it's more like General Curtis LeMay back in the Vietnam days, which is, we need to bomb them back to the Stone Age. And the reason we didn't do things is we fought with one hand behind our backs and tied behind our backs and all that. all that kind of thing. So I do think absolutely the Harrison refusal to break with Biden on this was costly, although given the scope of this election, I don't think it was the main cause of why the election went the way it did, although for many of us, it was a central concern since October 7th, 2020.
I mean, it's interesting because I'm trying to think back to how Joe Biden behaved in 2020 during the George Floyd uprisings. And he certainly didn't call protesters paid or working with a foreign government or terrorists, or, you know, I mean, the Harris campaign hasn't called them terrorists, but, you know, there's been, the Democratic Party has largely taken the biggest groundswell of young progressive momentum, which is against genocide, and squandered it. I mean, just politically speaking, just bad faith or good faith, whatever faith politics, Donald Trump, and you're absolutely right, full of BS as he was, you know, said things that were, you know, much more like a little, like a little wink and a nod that he knew that there was this massive outcry. He obviously, you know, wants to deport Palestine protesters, but there was this wink and a nod because it was so clear that this lane was wide open. And again, just like with the, you know, just like with the Black Lives Matter movement, Democrats squandered that, although Biden did manage to win. But there's massive energy. There's massive energy around gun control. There's massive energy around climate change. There's so much there. And of course, it's more than that. It's about, you know, corporate power. I did want to just name one thing when you said Donald Trump wants to move the war to the U.S.-Mexico border. I think we are going to see that. And I mean, not just in the ways that, you know, immigrants are going to be mass detained or deported or brutalized, because again, U.S. strategy on the border is basically to be as bad as cartels. But I think that we will see Donald Trump do some dumb shit, like actively and openly starting a war with cartels. Like I think we might, that's the kind of bloodlust he's been promising. And I think that's something we might actually see, which is terrifying, and very should be scary for everyone, no matter whether you live close to the border or not, anywhere. Like, this is bad news. So you know, I have as journalist Yohan Grillo come on occasionally, and he always talks about, you know, the you know, Mexican cartels and Central American cartels. That's sort of like his, you know, that's his beat. And it's like, I foresee a lot of bloodshed and violence, and specifically, you know, coming from the new Trump administration, making that situation so much worse than it already is. Anyway, that's just sorry. We should wrap soon. So Max, any final thoughts?
Well, I mean, the framework that animated most of the progressive movement in the last few years and in this election was the need to block the right and try to build independent power, progressive power, to start a new progressive cycle in U.S. politics. As a broad framework and orientation, I think that's still what we need to do. We need to block the right, and now that's not going to translate into blocking the right's ascent to power. It's going to be blocking the right in terms of all the moves that it's going to make to try to implement its agenda.
Yeah.
And undermine their base, try to create splits, and everywhere where they overreach or do certain things which, because of their lies, they plan to do things which will lead to some buyer's remorse. We need to the block side. And we have to do the build side, building where we have a progressive base, And where there are organizations that need to be built, Justice Dems, the labor movement, building the alliances between the different progressive forces that you were in that Justice Dems ballpark, Working Families Party, PDA, and so on. All
Block
of those
and
kinds
build.
of
This is I'm putting up convergencemag.com, where Max and others discuss these kinds of strategies. But yeah, everyone should check it
Right.
out. But, so yes, keep going. Apologize.
So that's our broad frame. That's our broad framework. And then we need 2 or 3 other things over time. One is we're going to need to get a lot more specific about what, as we see what the Trump administration starts to try to implement, we have to have specific responses that are appropriate and that build our strength and concentrate where we can. So that's one thing. And then we need a whole deeper level of thought and strategizing about how to actually build a practical working class base that can be a reliable force, the most reliable force in terms of defending against fascism and also driving forward a third Reconstruction agenda, a progressive agenda in US politics. That's going to require another level of empirical research, collective thinking, putting our heads together, that goes deeper than what we've achieved so far. There is now, since 2016, the left since Bernie's campaign, the George Floyd uprising, Me Too, now the Palestine Solidarity Movement, there's more cohesion in the left around the broad strokes of what is a comprehensive progressive agenda. Who has to be the social base? And there's networks of organizations that have started to work together with Justice Dems, Working Families Party, sections of the labor movement, M4BL, Seed the Vote. There's a whole bunch of those kind of things. We have to keep building that current, but we also need another level of theoretical and analytic discussion about how we got to the place that we got. What are the transformations in the political system, the way the political economy works, and the structures, the organization and cultural structures of the working class? That's not going to happen overnight. We need to do all these things that we can. And different individuals, I want to go back to the point at the beginning. It's a pretty daunting agenda and it's a very daunting moment. And we're not going to get quick answers. And we have to take a deep breath and recognize we are not going to solve this problem in the immediate few days and weeks. We're not going to come up with, okay, this is American pragmatism. Take a pill, get a quick fix. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. We have to take a deep breath, take a look at the long view, and figure out how we're going to get through what's going to be a very, very rough, at least 4 years. We'll be lucky if it's just 4 years.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we have to take some deep breaths, get as much unity as we can, be generous to each other. I agree with what you said. The blame game is just not going to get us anywhere at this point.
No, I mean, it's not helpful, and because we already knew where the blame lied even before this result. I mean, we've been saying it for so many months, so it's okay. Where there's and I I always stand behind, doing less harm, and I always stand behind fighting fascism and a broad coalition to defeat Donald Trump, and I don't think anyone should shy away from having had that stance and also for fighting for that. And so, I'm, it's interesting, Max, the last thing I'm going to say is, I've been saying there's nothing I wanted more than for Democrats to lose over Palestine. Like, I'm being 100% honest with you. There's nothing I wanted more than for them to lose over Palestine. But I knew that I didn't want Donald Trump. So of course I would never advocate for that. And we don't deserve to lose because Kamala Harris will be fine, and the Democratic ilk and the consultant class will be fine. Everyone will be fine, but it's the most vulnerable who won't be. But what has happened is so much bigger than losing over Palestine that it both simultaneously terrorizes me, but also makes me kind of cackle at how obvious and how clear this defeat was and how clear our heading is, even though we have those multiple prongs. So it's like, oh, no. It's not just about the war machine and, our relationship to Israel. It is also about neoliberalism. It is also about, not having a broad economic plan. It's also not having, any countervailing vision. It's also about having these shitty Democrats. It is so much more. And that is at once horrible and beautiful because of what it is all what it is all proven. But again, we are not the leftists to say, ha ha ha, we told you so, and sit on our hands. We are the leftists to get to work. And thank you so much, Max Elbaum, for your vision and your wisdom and your, reminding us to situate this in the long fight, to take deep breaths and to, I almost had that without coughing, but that's okay. I couldn't take a deep breath without coughing. I've been sick for like 3 weeks. Max Elbaum, thank you so much. You're wonderful. I'm coming to the Bay in December, so I'm hitting you up.
Okay. Look forward. Right. Thanks,
all right.
French.
Thank you, Max, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to read some comments and then F off into the afternoon. I have a plane to catch. I got to get back to my baby and my man. Moon Dragon says, anyone else wistfully eyeing the Canadian border? I was getting Canadian immigration ads this week. I mean, yes, of course. Have I thought about leaving? Yes, many times. Will I still think about leaving? Absolutely. So no one, like, I absolutely think about leaving, but I also think about staying and fighting. And I only want to go to a Spanish language country, and my husband doesn't want to, so whatever. Saragon, thank you so much for this super chat. Gutted for you. Love from the UK. Thank you. Rachel Atwood says, I knocked doors in Lackawanna County, PA, one of the few that went for Harris. My host in Scranton is worried Trump will punish them for it financially. Rachel, you're such a wonderful member of this community, and the fact that you did that, it just proves it. And thank you. You're the best of the Frantifa. Thank you for saying that. And yes, it is really terrifying that based on your donations, I mean, we've already, or your political work, we've already seen people bring out, okay, this person donated to that. Like, what if you donate to UNRWA? Like, could that be used against you? I don't say that to scare anyone, because we should still donate. But these are the kinds of questions. Of course, there's a siren because it's New York. Benjamin Morrill, thank you for coming out, Francesca. Not going to stop resisting. The fight is just way harder now. The whole neighborhood knows I'm here for them, and half are Trumpers. Tried so hard to get them. Oh, they're coming for me. Yeah, they are coming for me. Camperman 5000, do not let that piece of blank make you feel less than, for there's nothing less than that piece of blank. Agreed. Sailor Digurin, thank you for your super chat. I legitimately hate America today. The country has died, and the maggots have killed any chance we might have had to respond to climate change. I just wish I could end and not deal with this anymore. Dude, I really identify with that. I think a lot of us are, I think Max Elbaum spoke to that a lot of us will check out. We feel like we're checking out. That, people might, sort of retreat into their own families, into their own niches. And I also think sometimes that's okay. And it's also okay to feel like where you can make the most impact might just be really hyper locally. But yeah, let's see. Marcelichka, thanks so much for that super chat. I can't tell if you're giving me a super chat to rub it in my face or being nice about it, because, it could go either way, but I'll take your money. Terrence Trumbo says, curious to see how this affects our relations with Iran, since Trump seems to be aligned with Putin and Russian Federation is aligned with Iran to the point where they would defend them militarily. That is interesting. That is an interesting spin on all of this, that like the particular, the particular formations of international powers might be, I mean, no, I take that back. Trump is aligned with Russia, but also Trump's aligned with Israel. So there's nothing that's going to get him to re-enter into an Iran deal or soft pedal on Iran at all. But hey, maybe we will have a bunch of libs who are like, let's change our foreign policy in the Middle East finally. That will be fun. Leslie M, thanks so much for that super chat. And Sul Joe, thank you for your super chat. Says Elon announced that under Trump the economy would go to shit and normal people will need to suffer. I mean, what's interesting about what you're saying and what is being promised by the Trump administration is that they're being very open with the fact that people will have to suffer, i.e., us. We will have to suffer. Some of us will be, rounded up. Some of us will be censored. Some of us will be obviously, doxxed and followed. But also, we're going to have to feel the pain. And every fascist leader, you saw this in Argentina, they're saying like, okay, we're going to take a chainsaw to public education in this country, and some of you are going to have to feel this pain. I mean, they are already prepping people with their language for the kind of state enacted violence and economic violence and political violence that they are going to wage on all of us. And Zane the Magic Puffer Dragon says, I'm worried about my Social Security and Medicare getting gutted because of Project 2025 getting enacted, and I'm freaking out about it. And that, I think, to Max's point about places where we can fight back and sort of make inroads into some of the MAGA, voters, that's exactly where. Because Republicans don't want their Medicare cut. They don't want their Social Security cut. And so how do we focus on that? Because they are going to try and cut it. Sister Kendra Goth, Truth Lobbyist. Jesus, what a name. Idiocracy, the movie on steroid, is now our reality. Absolutely. Sean, thanks for the super chat. Outcome sucks, but continuing the fight regardless, if for no other reason than out of spite. I mean, oh my God, amen, my guy. Like, half of me is like, well, I'm going to fight because I fucking hate y'all. Because me rolling over and being like, okay, that is intolerable. That makes me angrier than anything ever, right? I can't let the Piers Morgan ghouls win. Joaquin Veith says, continue your good work, and thank you so much for that super chat. And Fermion Talpin says, I like when you speak from the heart. Oh, God, I try to. Clearly, my head's not working, as you guys can tell. Too many whiskeys. Zero PE says, America gets the leaders it deserves, DBW. Until we are willing to change the type of leaders we elect, we continue to moving in all the wrong direction. Love you, Franny. All power to all the people. Amen. And thank you for that. JL, Fran, I'm so worried I can't shake it off. He's going to have all the branches of government. The GOP will claim they have a mandate. Here comes Project 2025. Yeah, man. It's fucking scary. But I do take comfort in the fact that there are more of us than there are of them. And if we can get our shit together, and if we can actually fight for some of these things, if we can actually work together, we stand a chance in blocking them. But yes, it is. I mean, what are we doing? I don't even know how the house is broken. So that's interesting that you're saying it might be all three branches. Matthew the Celt, Francesca the host with the most, Piers Morgan's own shit poster. If she calls her UK speed bag, he's never going to ghost her. Fiorentini on a poster. That is beautiful rhyming, my friend. And Matthew says, the only way I'd vote for Mango Palpatine is a contest to win a prize of being lodged into a raw sewage pond with a spatula, puking all the way. That's way more graphic than I wanted. And thank you so much for all those super chats, Matthew. I'm not going to read all of them, but Robert Angel says, would Kamala have won if she had promised to defund Israel? Here's the thing about if it's not that she lost with the sliver of voters that she most needed to win to carry states with, like, in Michigan or Wisconsin or places with, an Arab and Muslim community. It's that if she had reversed course on this issue, which hindsight, very difficult to do when you're in that effing administration. But if she had, let's say she had, the groundswell of support, the people who would have, the additional layer of people who would have knocked doors for her, the additional energy that would have proved, the righteous anger that needed a vessel and needed a leader, she could have taken that up. Yes, she would have faced down obviously a lot of money, but at least she wouldn't have been running scared. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is why, I juxtapose Kamala Harris with your Summer Lees, your Cori Bushes, your Jamal Bowmans. They're not scared. Say what you will about them. They might have lost their race. I mean, Summer Lee didn't, but they're not scared. They're not scared of AIPAC money, right? They're taking a stand and they have the wind at their backs, meaning the people. And so, who's to say what would have happened if a politician took up the most popular cause of the year? Maybe that would have helped them. And had anything to back it up. But look, I don't know if she believes in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't say. She can only take it up if she actually believed in it. Do you think it was part of his secret as to why he got more votes apart from some plausible outside interference? Kingdom of Hearts is asking. Look, I don't deny that there was. I mean, I don't know. I think we have to see how all the votes shake out and how close they were versus some of the polling. I don't know exactly what that's in reference to, but Jackson, thanks so much, says, how does the left-wing media change the narrative for the future and purge grifters? This is a good question, dude. I gotta go, but maybe we can talk about that on Friday. Jody Odell gave out 10 memberships. Thank you so much. And anti-corporatist member for 8 months, says, characters like Tucker try to sell right-wing populism. Let's go to their meetings and primaries and show them real populism. Amen. Also, I wanted to thank, actually, maybe I'll just thank you on Tuesday, but I wanted to thank Justin Thompson for becoming a patron of the Franny Stand tier. Here's what I will say about left-wing media. You're going to see a number of figures who were once progressives turn to the right. They're going to see if it's not directly dollar signs, it's support, it's the accolades they're getting for having right-wing talking points. You're going to see some people make that pivot even more. That's going to be surprising in some cases and obvious in others, and I'm actually deeply terrified about it. I think based on this show and appetite for political podcasts, I think that's going to wane. So thank you everyone who supports this show, because I need it more than ever. And also, I really love feedback. And so if you want to send me thoughts, please do. Please comment or send anything to bishiation@gmail.com, BISHIATION. Or if you're a patron, I love listening to my patrons first. What do you want to hear from the show and see from the show? Who do you want to have on? How do you want to talk about these things? And for real talk, real talk. I'm thinking about bringing back Newsbroke, because ain't nothing fun about a Trump administration without Newsbroke. Am I right? So we'll see if I ever get the money to do that. And if not, we might have to just GoFundMe that shit. So I'm nervous for what this means for left media. I'm nervous for what this means for mainstream media. I'm nervous for what this means for the truth and information more broadly. Everybody get on Blue Sky. Everybody get offline as well, and go out in the world and make a lot of fucking trouble. I love y'all. We will see you I'm going to do a show on Friday. Oh, yes, I will. Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you to everyone who works on the show. And see you in just a couple of days.